So we are on chapter 7 of The Marriage Mentor, and chapter 7 is entitled, All He Wants Is Sex When She Longs for Romance. And now there's always somebody that's watching going, no, that's not us. It's actually the other way around for us. I'm the one, the wife wants it, and the husband's the one that wants more romance or whatever. So I get that. You may not be the typical what we're talking about, but stick with us because we're going to talk through some insights. The story in the very beginning of chapter 7 talks about Tim and Karen, and they met at church, and from the time that Tim walked in the door, Karen couldn't wait to be with him, and they ended up getting married, and everything was great until pretty soon they were both working full time, and they were tired, and they just weren't making time for romance, and stuff that should have been happening in the marriage bed was either not happening at all, was very not romantic, kind of a series of quickies, and they kind of lost the spark. So what we can talk about on video without getting a lot into the nitty-gritty, and let me just preface this by saying I meet women all the time that say, I'm just not that into it. I just don't like it. It just isn't great for me. I have an ebook out, and it is called A Christian Woman's Guide to Great Sex in Marriage. And if you find yourself in that situation, it's really some step-by-step insights to really help you learn to enjoy the marriage bed. So I would suggest, if you're in that place where you need more on that subject, that you get yourself a copy of the ebook, A Christian Woman's Guide to Great Sex and Marriage, and you can find it wherever online distributors are. But that would be a good resource for you. But here's the thing that I don't think that wives realize. And I didn't realize it for a really long time. We kind of look at our husband's need for sexual intimacy with us as this physical release that they need to have, that it's something completely physical for them, and it's just, and wives think,
some truth to it.
Yeah, and wives, the husband's not spending time romancing her like he did in the early days. And let's be honest, you put a few kids in the mix and everybody's tired, and romance is kind of one of those things that it just takes a lot of work. So again, if wives are going to live with their husbands according to knowledge, we have to teach our husbands how to even romance us. What means romance when I had no children and I was just, doing my own thing and taking care of myself basically, and my husband, when I have a few kids and I'm tired and I've been touched all day long and my physical is just on overload sensory, being able to coach your husband and say, hey, I just need a few minutes with no one touching me. Can you put these kids to bed or feed them dinner? Let me go take a bubble bath. I'll make it worth your while. And really, I think that is something that husbands don't understand what changed. They just know wives maybe aren't as amorous as they once were. So we get to ask for help. And a lot of times I think wives, we don't ask for the help. So what does sex mean to him? Most women understand that men have a strong physical desire for sex. So why do wives make their husbands feel apologetic for wanting sex? I think one reason is because a woman's need for sexual intimacy is emotionally driven. We want to feel loved, desired, and beautiful. But when it seems as though a husband's desire is a mere sexual urge, it becomes easy to wrongly assume that they are acting selfishly and resent it. But what gets overlooked is the fact that a husband's sense of well-being and confidence is very much wrapped up in the sexual intimacy he enjoys with his wife. And here's an outtake quote from the book. Your husband's God-given need to connect with you physically means just as much to him as good communication means to you. And a lot of times what I'll explain to wives is, imagine if your husband came home from work for 2 weeks and you wanted to talk to him. You're maybe a stay-at-home mom, or maybe you work full-time and you're running errands in between, and you just want to connect with him. What's going on at work? What do they wear out there if you're a stay-at-home mom and you're like, I've been wearing the same yoga pants for a week. What did you have for lunch? I ate the crust off the kids' bread. I mean, you're just kind of lonely. It's funny how lonely being a stay-at-home mom can be. And I remember I spoke at a MOPS thing, and one woman came up to me and said, you nailed it. I'm so lonely. And when I told my husband how lonely I was, he said, why? You have 4 kids with you all day long. So they just don't understand that kind of loneliness.
Whereas we like that kind of look.
Yeah. So what we can realize is this. If our husband came home for 2 weeks and said, I've used all my words, don't talk to me. I just want to sit in front of this television and watch TV. I don't want to connect with you emotionally through conversation. We as wives would feel rejected and alone, and we would tend to look for that emotional connection somewhere else, whether it's through a relationship with our girlfriend, or whether it's talking to our kids, friends on the internet. A lot of times we still go try to fill that void somewhere else because we're lonely, or we at least long to be known, and we want to share our lives emotionally with someone.
And maybe that's happening.
Yeah, it could be. And husbands, you need to realize too, as deeply as you want to connect with your wife in the marriage bed, that is your God-given need. God has given her the need to connect with you emotionally through conversation, touch, and romance. But wives, if your husband ignored you for 2 weeks and didn't let you talk to him or listen to you or talk to you, you would feel rejected and alone. In the same way, God has given our husbands a need to connect with us in the marriage bed. And when we say, no, I'm too tired, kids have been touching me all day, I don't have time for that right now. When you make getting the house in perfect order before you go to bed the priority, and then you're too tired to be intimate with your husband, you've made the wrong choice. So evaluate that, and maybe there's some things you can take off your plate and ask your husband to take off of your plate. One more comment that I was going to say is he just wants you to want him. This is on page 137. Husbands, let's see. When you mistakenly view your husband's need for sex as some sort of primal urge to be satisfied from time to time, you're missing the true ministry that God has given you to affirm your husband's deepest emotional needs through sex. Did you know that when you pursue your husband sexually, you have a profound influence on him in all areas of his life? Men tend to struggle with feelings of inadequacy and loneliness. When you find your husband sexually desirable and he feels loved for who he is, then you will fill him with a sense of strength, well-being, and confidence. Men are more confident and alive when they're enjoying a healthy sex life with their wives. And one husband said, what happens in the bedroom really does affect the way I feel at the office the next day. Another husband said, sex is a release of day-to-day pressures, and it really does seem to make everything else better. So I know we as wives don't understand this God-given need, this vulnerability that God has given our husbands, and we as wives are the only person that can fulfill that ministry that God's called us to for our husbands. So forsaking that ministry, the Bible talks about don't go too long without coming together, or you'll give place to the devil. And whether that means, a husband has a wandering eye, or whether that just means it divides you and doesn't knit your very souls together in intimacy as a reminder of your covenant to each other. God created sexual intimacy for husband and wife to be enjoyed in the marriage bed, and it's honoring to the Lord when we serve our husbands in that way and really pursue them, not just say, oh, it's Tuesday, let's do that thing we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. This is not a real funny one.
It's not funny. It's okay. It's just down and dirty, nitty-gritty.
We don't banter about this one. It's a serious thing because, God has called us to find that sexual fulfillment in the marriage bed. In fact, Hebrews says the marriage bed is undefiled. And so there's a great importance to that. In fact, God gave sex to man and woman before there was sin in the world.
Right.
Satan's the one who destroyed it and made it dirty and made it just completely made it was something that is foreign to God. But He created it for us to enjoy. There's so much of that when you look at the covenant of marriage. It really is fulfilled in the act of sex. And husbands, take the Song of Solomon and read it to your wife. When that goes back to a chapter about beauty and whatnot, but if you don't have words to say or can't think of how to say your wife is beautiful, read a few little excerpts from Song of Solomon. That'll get her going. And then take her a couple of aspirin, and if she says, I don't have a headache, then you say, gotcha. No, don't do that. That's a trick you should not do. But it does work. But God has given us that marriage intimacy, and so husbands, we need to make sure too that it's not just an animalistic need that we have to get fulfilled, but to take our time to make sure that our wife enjoys that experience as well. And we're not going to get into all that nitty gritty. Is that in the book, in your other book?
Christian Woman's
and there's
Great Sex and
yeah, and there's other books that men you can get a hold of and read on that as well. But it's recognizing that even though it might be a thing, well, we don't have a lot of time in this moment. That happens sometimes even in our relationship, and we don't have a lot of time. But let's just do this because we need to connect in this way. You still take the time to make sure your wife is enjoying and to make sure you minister to her. It's a ministry. It's not just doing a deed. It's not just a fleshly thing that we're doing. It's a ministry. It's something that God has given to us. So I'm not going to belabor it that much with the guys.
Well, just for wives, romance begins in the middle of the day when you shoot her a text and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about you," or
that we have a tendency to turn it on and just go, "Oh, hey man, I'm ready. I'm good to go. Let's go for it." And it's kind of like with the old teapot thing, right?
Go ahead.
What's the thing? What's the other one? Microwave and a teapot? I don't know.
Okay. So the microwave is the husband and the teapot.
Yeah, we're like ready to go, man. 30 seconds, boom, we're good to go. But you put hot water in a teapot, and it takes a little while to warm it up and get it going and get it steaming and get it whistling. Yeah. So with that, you just maybe you touch your wife during the evening, and women, I know what you're going to do. You're going to say, "Oh, you just want to have sex, that's why you're touching me." So what? Let him have that. He's touching you, so give him a break.
On the other hand, guys, you could hold her hand when you're walking into church.
All right, men, you can go a little farther too.
Things you did when you were dating, right? That you stopped doing, walking 5 steps ahead of her.
But you kind of take the wind out of his sails when he's trying. He's going, "Okay, I'm trying to help you with the dishes, or I'm trying to help you with the kids. I'm trying to touch you and trying to tell you look beautiful." And then when you come back with, "Oh, you just want sex?" Say, "Okay, I'll go back to my garage and I'll do what I was doing before. Thank you." Don't do that to him. And men, on the other hand, play your cards right. Don't. Can we say play your cards right?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. Woo her the way you did when you were dating. I think that is...
And not like woo woo.
Well, we like that too.
Well, okay. But woo. Take your time.
Woo woo. That was good.
Thank you. Every once in a while. So anyway, that's important. And so men, if you would keep that. It's a gift from God. Enjoy it and enjoy that time together. Women, same thing. Realize it is a gift from God. You're not just doing a wifely duty and
actually, men aren't interested in their wife just doing the wifely duty.
Yeah, I mean it's nice maybe in the moment once in a while just to get that release that Rhonda was talking about, and that's in there. That's in us. But there's more to it, and so let there be a little bit of that romance. And men, make sure you do your part in that too. Again, we kind of come back to what we talked about from the very beginning. It's about serving one another and about loving one another in the way that we need to be loved. And so that sometimes gives us a little push to maybe do it in the right way. And
yeah, that's good. And it's kind. It's kind to recognize each other's vulnerabilities and needs. I mean, I want to be romanced, and I think you talk about in this chapter, it's not in your wheelhouse. I mean, this man wrote his own marriage vows. We wrote our vows together. He did that for me. He didn't want to.
Now it seems ridiculous. We got perfectly good vows in our marriage thing. Why do we go write our own? I don't understand.
And yet they hang on the wall in every house we've ever lived for 36 years, and it's a reminder of our covenant.
I didn't put them up, she did.
One of the quotes that you say in The Marriage Mentor, and I do love it, is you say, as a pastor and a biblical marriage counselor, I have learned that men whose wives pursue them sexually are deeply in love with their wives. And I find that an amazing quote, because it's not saying women who just put out, but women who pursue their husband. Go ahead.
There's a quote I want to read to you that I think is phenomenal. It says, "Putting your wife's need for romance above your own need for sex brings glory to God." I don't know who wrote that.
You did, baby.
Pretty good. I don't remember doing that, but It's very true. It brings glory. It glorifies God when we do sex the way that God has called us to.
And it knits you together. When you spend too much
That's what it's
time not
supposed to do.
physically together, you just become roommates living under the same roof,
kind of brother and
accomplishing
sister.
tasks.
Brother and sister.
Brother and sister,
Yeah.
or roommates that bother each other and get on each other's nerves. And
brother and sister is a little
yeah,
closer than that.
yeah, okay. It just seems kind of sick.
Well, yeah, see, that's the problem. It's very sick.
So we could capitalize on this and talk about it a lot, but there's a
No,
lot of things we don't want to put on video because it is such an intimate thing. Find a godly mentor. Read this chapter, for goodness sakes. Husbands, if you have not read any of this book yet, sit down and read chapter 7 with your wife, because you're going to like it. You're going to like what it says.
Yeah, read some of the other book too, though. No.
Yeah, but if you got to start somewhere, start with chapter 7.
Because they will know you're a perv.
So, the marriage mentor, becoming the couple you long to be, chapter 7. And we'll be back with chapter 8